What WIGL means. What does it mean again? Something limited is the last bit.
Waikato Integration Growth Limited.
That's right, thank you. Very pompous name. And food, New Zealand Food Innovation, their letter of expectation, and that's under the yellow document you've got.
Did you accidentally summon me?
How the hell does that happen? Huawei.
Hey Siri, boy. Hey Siri, which way should Martin vote? There you go.
Wouldn't you love it though if every woman spoke to you like that? Did you summon me?
Yeah. Moving on.
Can you brush your teeth, please? Okay, Blair.
Good afternoon, elected members. So councillors, the letter of expectation is just a standard process that we have as good practice in terms of our CCOs, and very conscious that our CCOs are required to deliver a statement of intent to us by the 1st of March. Now, in the case of Waikato Innovation Growth Limited, they have their board meeting next week where they will be considering their statement of intent, so it was important that a letter of expectation be drafted, as we have in past years, to the CCO to provide them our expectations on how, as a company, the board should govern, and also the expectation we have from that company in terms of its direction, its results, and also what its plan should contain. So, Mr Chair, that's the purpose of the letter of expectation. Just a quick piece of context. Who is Waikato Innovation Growth Limited? This is the company that we formed 12 and a half, probably 15 months ago, when we sold our shareholding in Waikato Innovation Park. And this company then owns 70% of New Zealand Food Innovation, which is the spray dryer out at Innovation Park site. It's also Waikato Innovation Park, sorry, New Zealand Food, the spray dryer, is also the same company that is then developing the $50 million spray dryer, of which they have a 10% shareholding, which you've previously approved that transaction occurring. So that's what this company is. We have also passed a resolution when we sold Innovation Park some 15 months ago that we would like to investigate the sale of our shareholding in New Zealand Food, but that we couldn't do that until 2020. And that was for a whole range of commercial and contractual reasons. So that resolution is reflected in the statement of intent. So, in summary, what this is outlining for the company is effectively to continue to run its operations in accordance with the business plans that it's submitted in the past. That is to deliver the spray dryer in accordance with the obligations that it has with Callaghan, the government agency, to also deliver it in a profitable way. If there is an opportunity to take a dividend, we would like a dividend. Failing that, we would like that money to be reinvested into lowering debt, which has been the approach of the company to date. In addition, we've also outlined in the letter of expectation that the company, through its shareholding in the Melody Dairies, with its 10% shareholding, develop and build that spray dryer in accordance with the business plan that we've also endorsed. So no difference from what we've approved in the past. Business as usual, but again, just signalling that we are seeking to review our shareholding in 2020 as per a previous resolution of council. So happy to take questions, Chair.
Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, I haven't had a chance to read this until now, but my question is around, you mentioned debt, and also the fact that we are a 70% shareholder in the company. There are other shareholders who I believe we don't know who they are because they exist under a. Can
I just help you there? So we own 100% of Waikato Innovation Growth Limited, which is the main company. That company owns 70% of New Zealand Food. The other 30% of New Zealand Food is owned by Callaghan, the government agency. The New Zealand Food is a 10% shareholder in a joint venture entity called Melody Dairies Limited Partnership. The other 90% is owned by 4 entities, and we do know who they are.
We now know who they are.
We do know, yes, we do.
Okay.
And that entity has been formed and construction has started.
Okay.
We have no exposure beyond our 10% investment into Melody Dairies, but we have no financial exposure to the debt of that.
To that company.
To that company.
So when you say the profits would be going towards repaying debt?
So I'm referring to New Zealand Food. So New Zealand Food is the main trading entity here.
So there is existing debt there.
Correct. And their practice has been to use the profits that they make to retire debt.
Which is what Innovation Park used to do too,
Correct.
didn't they?
And councillors may recall that when we sold Innovation Park, one of the conditions was that $4 million of the sale went into this entity, New Zealand Food, to retire some debt, to keep it within its banking covenants.
Okay.
And that has been the practice, and in fact, I can certainly say they are continuing to retire debt up until this day.
Okay. So my last question then is around perception around debt. Do you think the letter of intent, is it called? Letter of expectation should include something along the lines of making sure that the debt that has been acquired by the other partners has not been acquired on the basis of any understanding from the lender of that debt that the City Council is somehow involved in the company? I just have a concern, whilst we might not have a legal liability to make good any debt or any loans of those other parties, there is always that perception that because the council is involved, that there's a kind of a certain element of, I use the word guarantee, but use it reservedly, that any shortfall in the repayment of that debt will be made good because there's a public entity involved.
It's certainly, I'm no lawyer, councillors, but my understanding from all the experts is that the structure of the entity, there is no recourse back through to New Zealand Food.
No legal recourse.
There's no legal recourse.
And I suspect that to be the case.
Yep.
I'm more concerned about the perception that might be there, and whether or not we should be covering that off in our expectations so that the other parties are quite clear that our involvement is as a completely independent party to any perception that their lenders might have.
We have previously, when we approved the Melody Dairy investment by New Zealand Food, at that time, one of the resolutions of council was such that the investment of the entity would in no way prevent or affect our ability to sell our shareholding down the track. And we wrote to the board at that time, making that very, very clear. So, but I'm in your hands, councillors. I think that the New Zealand Food and Waikato Innovation Growth completely understand that we have there is no guarantee, there is no backing from council here. It's a completely standalone entity. So I'm in your hands. I'm happy to add something, but it's certainly, there's no expectation or any view that council is behind this.
Okay, well, look, I don't know any more in terms of the legal aspects than you do. I just have a real concern. I have a concern, not a real concern. I have a concern that, that there might be that perception out there. And look, it's a worst case scenario because the previous dryer has been financially successful. But I just have this little concern. I have this concern that that perception might well be there. And that could have some reputational risk for the council unless we try to make it very clear at this, and particularly at this point in time, that we are clear in that we are quite clear in where we stand around this to mitigate against any future events that might, and they might be remote, might arise.
I think councillors, I mean, the issue I guess you're raising here is pertinent to any other CCO that we have an investment who also borrow money. So and I think, as I say, this company, if anything, is looking to make sure that it's seen as not as council. So New Zealand Food is doing everything it can to be an entity that is it's independently governed. I guess my view would be that adding something into the letter wouldn't necessarily give us any greater weight. The board understands quite clearly that there is, from council's view, we have no undertaking to support any perception of guarantee of debt. The legal position is quite clear, but happy to make a change if that's the desire. But this position is no different to other entities that we have shareholding in who do borrow money.
And just to make it clear, it's the letter of expectation in terms of their strategic document, and this probably isn't one of their strategic considerations in developing their statement of intent. So we've got to make sure that we pitch the letter at the right strategic level as well.
Yeah, I'm raising it now. Yeah, I agree, I think, with that comment, but I'm saying we're right at the start of the partnership, if you like, now, and I'm just would be a little bit concerned if that arises. But look, I'm also at the behest of the council, so I'm not going to push it any harder. But I just think that there is a potential perception risk there.
I'm happy if there is no change to the letter. I will be going to the board meeting next week to discuss the letter of expectation. I'm more than happy just to reinforce again that situation.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rob. Leo.
Blair, in the letter, in the first paragraph there, we want to reply by next Thursday. Have we got time? Have they got time to do that?
We do. They have a board meeting early next week where they are going to be considering the draft statement of intent, and I have supplied them a draft copy of this letter, so they are aware of its contents. There is no surprises in there for them, so we are working to that.
Let's go.
Paula.
Just a much more high-level question than that. Thank you for the report. There again, getting it on the spot, but that's okay. In terms of the Chief Executive's earlier comments, Richard, about managing risk across all our investments and things like that, and how much appetite we have, because we've done very well out of our partnership, haven't we, to date? That has been a big positive asset for us, our shares. So, so will that kind of thing, and whether we're involved in holding shares of this nature or disposing of them, will that come into the conversation about what kind of risks we're prepared to take or not?
Well, I think, Councillor Paula, in this particular situation, Council has passed a resolution to say that whilst we are satisfied with the risk of the investment, we don't see it as something strategically that we need to be an owner of, and that we would like to investigate the sale. However, we just can't consider that until 2020 when certain legal obligations have passed. So,
yeah, no, I understand that, but we may have a conversation about, in general, these kinds of involvements.
Well, I think, yeah, and I think,
kinds of investments.
yeah, and I guess for this particular matter in front of us today, I guess I'm identifying that Council has identified that it does see an exit path. Probably your question is pertinent around any future opportunities and when they may arise in terms of do we create or do we invest in a particular CCO, and that's to be considered at that particular time.
Yes,
If I can help also, yeah. Councillor Paula, one of the things that we're doing to add value in the Audit and Risk Committee is to actually extend our reach in terms of our key strategic risks, to understand those risks that our CCOs are covering in their own key material risk registers. So Kieran, who's chair of the Audit and Risk, is very much wanting to bring that conversation in, either part of our list of key material risks, but most probably a separate list that are the key risks CCOs face, so that we can keep elected members across all of those.
Yeah.
And what mitigations are in place for that.
That's good. But I think you're catching me now, Blair. That's what I mean. Because sometimes it being, this one shows that there was benefit in doing that at the time. We've made a decision since, but we should have a look at a wide range of investments, as you say, and I thought that's what Richard was suggesting, that we would be discussing those kind of things.
We do have so as part of our review of the 10-year plan, we do have our investment and borrowing policies which talk about the nature of the investments we get involved in, as well as what their credit ratings are and so forth, and associated what our guarantees are or otherwise. So it is a conversation we have. What I think you're highlighting is we've got to bring that conversation to the fore and make sure it's clear that you're having that conversation. because generally during the 10-year plan, they're not necessarily the most exciting policies, but they're still reasonably relevant, and they do set expectations to staff and also to the community in terms of what our investment strategy is.
Thank
At the
you.
moment, we don't really have one.
Well,
We don't really invest much. But anyway.
that's right, so the conversation's open, isn't it? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Blair. I've just noticed that I'm the one who signs this. So can I, seriously, there's a couple of little changes that I'd like to make, but they're totally aesthetic in terms of commas and things like that. So when does it need to go?
I would like to formally send it before the meeting next week, so ideally tomorrow.
Okay, so I'll catch up with you later on. Okay, thank you. All right, so I will move that what am I moving? That we just, staff recommendation there is. I move the staff recommendations. Do I have a seconder? That's Mallet, Ryan. Those in favour, those against, carried. Anyone against? Okay, that was unanimously approved. Thanks, Lev. Okay, Sean. Okay, we're on item 13. HC report, second quarter, 1 October 2018 to 31 December 2018. Page 125 in your agendas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, I have a few comments that I'd like to make as a preamble to the report for taking any questions, and also come back to you verbally on a couple of items that were discussed when we presented the first quarter report for the H3 operation. Essentially, we've had another good trading result for the second quarter, so revenue's up on plan and our expenditure is down on plan, which is a nice sort of up and down position to be in. However, there's a couple of facts I'd like to draw your attention to despite that result. So first off, if you go to page 134 and look at graph 3, and I'm just doing this to try and explain a couple of things for you. Here we go. If you look at the bar chart, and you'll see in the October-November bars, the red lines which depict the 2017 calendar year for those 2 months is quite a bit higher than what we had budgeted for this for the 2018 months. So that's last financial year effectively in red, the current financial year that we're still in effectively green, being our budget. We, whilst we achieved our budgets for those particular months, they're well down on the year before. And the primary reason for that is that we did not have in the last quarter some of the big conferences that we enjoyed in 2017. So our financial result is good against our plan. We did foresee in our budgeting that we wouldn't achieve that same result for that particular type of activity, but it is reflective of the up and down nature of the business. So to give you an example, in 2017 we had a ULearn conference with 1,600 people over 4 days. We had a range of other very large conferences, around 700 or 800 people strong, once again over 3 or 4 days, and those big ones didn't come back a second year in a row. Having said that, a couple of them are coming back next year, and that's part of the cycle that we have. So I'm just trying to explain that there'll always be a bit of volatility there, but we've got a clear handle on it. Unfortunately, as our ability with our forecasting and forward projections improves, we're able to preempt that through our budgeting activity. The second item I'd want to just highlight for you, and I'm sure some of you have already spotted this, if you look at page 135 at table 4, you'll see that some of the numbers or metrics are once again less than the year before, and that's the same factor that we're talking about, where we had some extraordinary events take place in 2017 that weren't to be repeated this year. So whilst we are tracking on plan and everything else like that, once again the mix is a bit different. While we're on that page, graph 4 below, and although I don't have a comparative graph in this report to show you, what has been interesting for us to look at is that colour rainbows that you see in those different bars is quite different to the colour rainbows last quarter or the year before, which once again sort of talks to the some of the volatility of activity that we have going through. In terms of our forecast position, we're expecting to continue to hold the positive surplus against our budget for the year, if not improve it slightly. In quarter 3, that we're sort of in the middle of right now, we have had probably one of the more normal starts to the quarter, with a lot of heightened activity that we wouldn't normally see in a month of January. So not just the Sevens, but we had rock concerts, we had conferences on the 5th of January. And so we've had a much stronger start to the quarter that we normally would. The other thing I'd like to raise, and it is, I've raised this before, but once again it's for your awareness. When we talk about our business event activity, our conferencing and meetings and so forth, we are still enjoying around a 50% or just over 50% conversion rate. So every time someone phones us or asks for a quotation, over 50% of those will actually convert into a sale, which I think in our business is actually pretty good ratio to achieve, and we're pretty happy about that. However, once again, we have faced the challenge of losing some new business opportunity, primarily as a result of a lack of hotel rooms. And I want to give you a couple of examples, because I have had to pick a couple of my stuff up off the floor after we've missed out. But we had a opportunity for a World Urban Parks conference for 4 days. There was 600 people. A Harcourts conference, 1,000 real estate agents for 4 days, which might be interesting in its own right. And a World Vets Congress of 3,000 people for 4 days. We could cater to that at our venue easily, but we simply don't have the rooms for people to stay in. So that remains a challenge. The World Vets Congress was actually an opportunity that came to us as a result of the slowdown in the build of the International Convention Centre in Auckland. And we have had a few of those opportunities come to us as a result of the slowdown, and we have actually picked up a couple, but we've struggled to get the really big ones because of the accommodation situation. And also, to be fair, Auckland has responded extremely well, and I say Auckland City at large, in terms of making sure that those events don't leave town just because the International Convention Centre is behind schedule. So it's been a pretty interesting time for us, and I suspect that Hamilton, if we can accommodate people, will continue to benefit from the delays in that convention centre build for a wee while. There were two other items that I wanted to feedback on that were raised at last quarter's presentation. The first one is FPOS at Stadia. We are working with Montana on that issue. We are very proactive and positive towards the need for us to go to FPOS. Montana at the moment are less so. They have a hesitation over moving to FPOS because of the cost involved, the incremental cost to them that would be involved, and also they have a concern about the impact of speed of service and so forth. So we have at this stage not got a resolution to that debate, but we have supplied them with some reports from other stadia around the country and Australia on the matter, and they have agreed to do their own assessment and actually go and look at what happens at a couple of other stadia over the coming rugby season. So I want you to be assured that whilst we don't have a positive outcome to that particular question at this stage, we are working with it on Montana, but it does remain their right to be convinced, and they do have a concern on what the incremental cost would be to do that. The second item that was raised is to do with waste disposal. And I also listened in on a recent committee meeting where the matter of waste as it related to the Sevens event also came up. We have, as a result of your feedback on the matter when we reported on the first quarter, and actually the other day it stirred us all up again when it was raised in this room, we are embarking on a fairly major project to really look into with a bit more vigour than what we have perhaps in terms of how we're handling our waste management. We have a number of programs in place that are all very well and good, but we still do have too big a proportion of general waste that's being generated. We can overnight sort out the bins at the front of house so that everyone knows they can put plastics here, paper there, glass wherever. But the real issue is back of house. The real issue is what happens to those bins at the back of house. And at the moment at the stadium, for example, we actually have, a lot of people aren't aware of it, we have staff that are sorting through the rubbish on big trays, on big tables, I should say, to split it up. They are having to do the same at Claudelands, even where we do have had the recycling bins, because people just put stuff in whatever. I've looked at some of the other events going on in Auckland, and they employ staff to actually stand over the bins and direct people where to put their rubbish. So they're acting as the rubbish police. So it is quite challenging. And then the second part of the challenge that we have is sort of then where does it go and who's going to receive it. So we are working with the team here at Council to work on this, but I want to just say we are not going to just do something front of house so we all feel happy about ourselves when we know that back of house it doesn't work, and it will come at some cost. The other thing that's coming up is one of the big conferences is that it's coming back to us after they've rotated around a few cities, and they're coming back to us this year as a waste minimisation conference, which is quite a big conference, and they impose upon us quite a bit of rigour for their conference in terms of how we handle waste. We're actually in very early discussions with that organisation, and it's a trade organisation, to actually work with us starting now through until their conference on a management plan that will help us to actually do the right thing when it comes to waste minimisation, and use us, if you like, as a case study for some of the new technologies and ideas and processes that organisation's coming up with. So we'll keep you posted on that, but we haven't had a formal response to that yet, but it's one of the things that we thought might be a very good way to introduce this and actually help us get some partner support for that. The waste issue at the Sevens, we did have recycling in place. Once again, we had the challenges of sorting out in terms of what happened, but it is still a challenge because there is a significant amount, and Councillor Siggy, you experienced that in your volunteering at the Well Network stand, I know. So we are working with NZ Rugby on that issue and raising it as a much higher profile management plan for us to work through, rather than just relying on general waste that's happening. However, we're also asking them to work more fully with their sponsors, because a lot of the sponsors are providing an awful lot of waste. We collected literally thousands of yellow cowboy hats from one of the sponsors, and they've actually all gone out to different schools and everything else like that. But that's a lot of time and energy to work. And then there's another one that had yellow clappers and stuff. And so a lot of the sponsors stuff has actually been a big contributor to it. So I didn't want to belabor that particular issue, but I wanted to just give you some assurances that we are taking it seriously, even though we don't feel we have an adequate solution to that just yet. Last thing, which is a bit more current, and I wanted to, if I may, preempt Councillor Ryan on this. If you look at our financial summary on page 130, and if you look at the direct operating cost section, you will notice that we don't have a line item that says other costs, which is what Councillor Ryan raised earlier on in the reports. Basically, on the ledgers as it applies to H3, other costs are a cluster of things that we actually pay for back into council for some reason. They are hard operating costs. They are true above the line expenditure items such as IS costs, comms costs, data management costs, rates, water and everything else. And on our ledgers, that other cost section is actually related to where we just charged, from our buddies. And Lance has charged me $330 for something in Parks and Reserves, which we might have a chat about. But we, in the context of this report, those costs, we have put them into operating and maintenance, or professional costs or administrative costs or whatever. So if I'm just assuming Councillor Ryan was going to catch me out on that line. So
You haven't got another cost, have you?
that's what I'm saying.
I see.
But those numbers are in our report, but they are in places. So
Itemised.
sorry for the long introduction, but Mr. Chair, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Just a couple of things. On page 133, and I noticed it's also, I hadn't noticed it last night when I was looking through this, we've got that graph down the bottom, and you've got a figure called cost of sales, but I've just noticed on your full summary you also have a, so guys, you're probably better to go back to page 130 because there is actually a cost of sales figure in there. What are your costs of sales? Because you're not Montana, so you're not buying in food or beer to sell.
Correct. We are, however, purchasing technical services from people like Bidcom. We are purchasing on behalf of our clients security services, cleaning services. So there's a range of services that we provide through subcontractors.
Technically speaking, and might need an accountant, and Rob, you can listen to this too. Is that a cost of sales?
Yes, it is if it's related directly to the cost of an event.
And it's a cost that we then charge the client for.
Okay.
So the what comes back through the revenue line. So we have a lot of activity where we charge our clients for an external service. We have a lot of activity indeed where we charge our clients for our time. So whilst we have budget here for our personnel costs, a certain portion of our personnel costs we actually bill back to the client.
Some of that goes to cost of sales then?
Well, we're actually still reporting it under personnel, but we're going to have a little chat about that.
Not a good example. Yeah.
Correct. But so that's an example of cost.
So
of
like
sales.
you obviously you're not selling T-shirts or caps or food
No.
or anything like that.
No.
Okay, so those are the things that traditionally are costs of sales.
It's just services. So if there's a big trade exhibition that needs a whole lot of equipment or dividing panels or whatever that we don't have on stock, that we don't hire out to the client, and we rent it in, we just charge that back.
Okay, thank you for that. I wasn't too sure what it was. Okay, I just wonder if you could just comment on, and you've been very open about these things, that there is competition coming. The Auckland Event Centre, you said, is being held up. And can you just remind the members and myself how the sevens work again? We've had 2 years.
Yeah, so
and then is it going to Fiji or something, or is that just a rumour?
So the sevens, yes, we've had 2 years, which was the final 2 years of a 4-year contract that NZ Rugby had with International Rugby. NZ Rugby are still in discussions and really waiting for a definitive decision from International Rugby for another 4-year season, which actually would start in January 2020, next year, not far away. That agreement has yet to be finalised or locked in concrete. The agreement in place that we have is that NZ Rugby are putting Hamilton forward as the host city of note, if you like, for the next 4 years. However, our agreement with NZ Rugby is that we may only provide 2 of those 4 years, and the other 2 years may go somewhere else. And that's part and parcel of us wanting to keep the event fresh and avoid the potential for things going stale. We are still in a holding pattern as to knowing whether that's all locked down or not. We are pretty confident that it will be, but it's still awaiting formal ratification. And the reason for the delay is something to do with Las Vegas. Nothing to do with Las Vegas because of the scheduling in Las Vegas. And so they're just trying to juggle the whole series around the world. So the issue is nothing necessary to do with us, or New Zealand specifically. It's because of some other issues.
And the sevens is really exciting and really good fun and that sort of stuff. Just remind me, does council make any money? Does H3 make any money out of it?
Look, as we reported after the sevens in 2018, yes, there is money that we do make back, and it actually relates back to your cost of sales. So there are, whilst we do have the arrangement to provide the venue free of a hire charge. Where they require a lot of our services and support, we charge them for that, and that's where we do make some margin.
And there's a wee margin on
and
those,
we make
is
some margin on that, yes.
And is there any consideration that you talked about the waste minimisation? When one of our clients or is concerned about waste minimisation, why don't you just say to them, well, yeah, that's fine, you'll pay the cost for it. You'll pay for the 15 staff members who are wading through the rubbish to sort things out?
Look, it wasn't an actual fact. There was one example, and there's very few clients that actually come to us with requirements on that front. So that's that particular client, and there's sort of no cost involved because of what they do with us. The thing is, though, that a lot of our clients would say, well, hang on, that's the cost that you should bear anyway, because that's a part of the service. Or they would say that they have an expectation that we deliver to a certain standard anyway, and that is often a difficult point.
So in terms of competition with other venues, they will all be getting the same kind of requests?
Correct.
And things like that?
It's the same situation everywhere.
Okay, thank you, Sean, for me. Siggy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and great to hear that that you're talking to corporate about waste minimisation. That's awesome. Yeah, I picked up a lot of these hats. They were lying around. But what I wanted to ask you is, Sean, on page 137, the health and safety, and it just sort of struck me that with the medical treatment, concussion from cricket ball to the head, is that something that happens quite regularly?
No. It happened, I understand it happened 20 years ago at Seddon Park once before, but I mean the situation there was one of our groundkeepers was at the base where the groundkeepers hang out during the game, and it just so happened that a six happened, and at that particular point in time they were looking straight into the sun and couldn't quite see it, and it just glanced off the side of his head. It's he wasn't good. I mean he was okay, and then a few hours later he wasn't. So things were well looked after there, and he's fine. He's got back on the job pretty quick. But it is a risk of all of the games. So even at some of the recent games we've had here, just talk about crowds. I mean, it could have been someone in the crowd. So that is part of a thing that people need to be pretty self-aware.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Interesting. Thank you.
Sorry, because there's no one else. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to. The Well Network stand, in terms of the seismic stuff, is there any update on that, or what? I've forgotten what we're doing about it now.
Yeah, look, I don't have an update for you. We're still waiting for reports, but as Chris Allen indicated earlier on, he'll be coming back to council through a briefing on the total seismic situation for buildings across council, and Well Networks is absolutely one of those.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, there are no further questions. I'll move the report be received. Do I have a seconder, James? Any debate? All right, those in favour, those against, carried unanimously. No one's against? Okay, carried unanimously. Thank you, Sean. Okay, item 14, Vibrant Hamilton Trust Report, page 143 in your agendas. Excuse me.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First of all, start with an apology. The report said that Thomas Gibbons, the chair of the now defunct Vibrant Hamilton Trust, would be here just to present the final annual report, which you'll see in your papers was actually prepared on a disestablishment basis in line with a council resolution. Unfortunately, Thomas has had to go to Auckland on business urgently, so I've been left to hold the fort. And you'll be aware that both Mayor Andrew and I have been trustees on this as the council representatives in the last wee while, as per the trust deed. I think the report speaks for itself. This, there are some attachments which were they were circulated under separate cover, which were the annual report and the audit opinion. But the key part of the report is just about bringing effect to the council resolution to essentially put the money from the trust towards the council's contribution to the Waikato Regional Theatre project. So everything that needed to happen mechanically, process-wise, has happened now. For that to happen, the money's been paid across. There was a little bit left over, and in line with the trust deed and also our external funding plan, the extra 210,000 above the 6 million to go towards the regional theatre project, Momentum putting that towards one of our external funding partnership projects, which is the Zoo Waiwhakariki project. I'll leave it there, Mr Chairman, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. The guys who did this were doing it, they didn't get any pay for it, did they?
No, it's all, there's no
Right.
payment to be trustees or anything
And
like that.
this is a greasy little thing to do. Have we sort of thanked them properly? Perhaps I should be doing something like that too.
Yeah, so
maybe. Yeah.
we've just been going through the final part of the process where basically the trust has to be liquidated. That's pretty much happened. There's a couple of I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed, and then we will. We've done that informally and had a cup of coffee at Sierra and stuff like that. Okay. But formally from the council, we probably need to send a letter from probably you as Chair of Finance, because it'll look a bit unusual, Andrew sending himself a letter.
And has all that, there's no money left for a shout?
No, and the trust is like the council. We're very prudent with money that goes
It's kind of
towards.
appalling planning, to be honest, Lance. I can't believe that.
The shout was actually paid for out of Mayor Andrew's pocket himself. So.
Oh, thank you. We'll thank him now. Thank you, Andrew.
So there's Lynette Flowers, there's Thomas Gibbons, and there's also Malcolm Brooker, and then the Mayor and myself.
Okay, so the three externals, we should obviously write to, and
Yeah, so that's
it should be a joint thing from the Mayor and the Chair, because obviously, forget the Mayor's on it. These are three wonderful community people who have given their time, and we should acknowledge their contribution and time appropriately. Malcolm Brooker, as we know, is a former colleague, former councillor.
Okay, and Rob.
Yeah, just before Sean leaves, if he's leaving. My question might be slightly off point, but this does raise again the money that...
I may have to shut you down.
Yeah,
Rob,
I'm sure
sorry.
you will. I'm sure you will if I do go off point. Given that this money has found its way back into the theatre fund, and it was indirectly council money, when can we expect some sort of update on what's happening with the theatre? Time seems to be moving along. People are asking us what's happening. And I just thought, seeing Sean was still here and is on that planning committee, I don't want full detail, but just an idea as to what the timeline is for a reporting back.
Through the Chair. Look, I can give you an update any time, perhaps at a briefing session where there's an available slot to give you a status on where the project's at. There's actually quite a bit I can show you that you won't have seen as the detailed design gets more advanced. So if you'd like, I'm happy to ask for a slot to do that at a schedule.
And we could probably do that because we're just hoping to get Kelvin Eglinton along from Momentum Trust to talk about the PGF application we've had as well and how that's going. So we can probably do that at the same time just to be efficient.
So will that happen reasonably soon?
I think it's
just in terms of being able to
I think it might be on 6th of March or 1 in March anyway, so it's not too far away.
Yep, thank you.
Now, Rob, do you get their monthly, weekly email?
Oh, yeah, but that doesn't have the detail that I'd be necessarily... But just given that time is marching on, I just thought it was appropriate that we should be getting... And we are the major contributor to the major known contributor at this stage to the fund, that we should be perhaps being informed as to how things are going in terms of getting builders and pricing and all of those sorts of things, not just in terms of the Provincial Growth Fund.
Okay, thank you. All right, no names on the board. Push the button. Still hasn't come up. Okay. Oh, you didn't push it. If you don't push it, your mic won't go on, will it? Do you want to speak or not?
At debate.
Oh, debate. Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry. My apologies. Okay, I'll move the report. I move the recommendation, which is on page 143. Do I have a seconder? Gary and Mayor Andrew. Is there any debate?
This fund had $6 million of it in it, and it had been set up in a CCO, and to move it away from council, and I never approved of this model of money for decision making that should have been made around this table by 13 members and with Māori input, but it had been moved out of that into a CCO, and the CCO is very expensive to run as well, compared with what would have happened had it been left for council to use. Now, I want to particularly say that the trust saw this. They realised it was an expensive model, and they also saw that the theatre was a fantastic and enduring project for the city and for the people of the city, and moved the money into that project, which effectively meant that the trust was moved out of, there was no money left in the trust, which moved it out of council's hands altogether as well. So the shell of the trust, if you like, or the framework was donated over to Momentum, who and that money went towards the theatre, which was part of the $25 million that our city pledged to the theatre. So I particularly want to acknowledge Thomas Gibbons, who chaired this, a lawyer in town here, who I grew grew to like during this process. Malcolm Brooker, who I think most people around here knows, an old wise past member around this table, and a very successful businessman, who I think at the moment's on the world yachts sailing around the world, and he didn't take any of the $6 million for that. Which is very embarrassed that he's on this yacht with his wife, but it's the biggest cruise ship in the world, so it would be quite a fantastic experience. And Lynette Flowers, of course, who's with Lance, who was had a real key part to play in this, and myself. So just I did grow very fond of the people on this group during the process of moving this money over to the theatre, and I particularly acknowledged Lynette Flowers, who was the one who actually proposed it and put the idea forward of a way of having a long-standing good for the community and good for the city by doing this. And yeah, I'm very pleased with the outcome and where this all ended up, and particularly Lance, thank you for your support during this process.
Thanks, Andrew. Rob.
I don't disagree with Mayor Andrew in terms of the journey of travel and where the trust has ended up, but I would like to say in support of having entities outside of the political wing that can wisely invest even relatively small amounts of assets. This trust did particularly well. I think the fund started off at about $2 million, and through some wise investments, which in my mind the group of us sitting around the table would not have been able to agree on, they managed to grow the trust up to well over $6 million, and that was primarily during a time when we had significant downturns in the world investment market. So I'm still a supporter of where we can get better returns from using skilled people in our community who voluntarily give their time to help advance the city, that we should continue to do that going forward, and we shouldn't just suggest that because that was small and potentially inefficient, that we shouldn't consider similar types of entities going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. And just further to what Rob's saying, the trust didn't just accrue money and build it up. It actually, over that time, it had been making not huge amounts, but it had made donations and grants for a number of people. I think it did a major support at the some of the Hamilton Gardens projects, didn't it, a couple of years ago? Yeah. Okay, I've moved the report. It's been seconded. Is there any debate? Or have we done? Was that just debate we just had then? Was it? Okay, all right. Okay, those in favour. Those against. Are there any against? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 15, the Rototuna Family Golf Centre, new lease, Callum Drive, page 146. You're still here. You're not actually going, are you?
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'd like to introduce Claire Foster. Claire is a member of the Strategic Property team, and she is responsible for the management of Council's commercial leases. So you'll be seeing a lot more of her and a lot less of me in the very near future.
You're not thinking of growing a moustache, are you, Claire?
No.
I'm happy to take the report as read and answer any questions that you might have.
Andrew?
I'll move.
Are there any? Okay, we'll just make sure there's people who want to ask questions. Rob?
I've got one question, and that is around the paragraph 7, the 56% increase in the annual rental. Is it, and in fact that going forward it'll be a 5-yearly rental review. Is that 5-yearly rental review in line with normal market leases, given that we may be able to help the business by increasing it by 25% after 3 years and also improve our cash flow if we did it, every 18 months or 2.5 years rather than waiting for the end of 5 years.
Yes, look, this was the advice that was received from our valuation experts in terms of this particular type of lease on this activity on this site. So you appreciate that each one of these is fundamentally different.
Yep.
But this is a structure that both parties can comfortably live with.
Okay, thank you.
No more questions? Okay, Andrew's seconded. Andrew's moved it. I'll second it. Is there any debate? All right. Those in favour, those against. Is there anyone against? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item 14, appointment and remuneration of board members of council-controlled organisations, anyway.
So,
page 149. Yeah.
So I'll introduce the report. This is just an update of the policy, and there is no changes to the policy except updating Appendix 1, which is the list of current CCOs council and COs council currently has. So this is more of a process thing, updating that. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Where's the list of CCOs?
Appendix 1, so on page 153. So, sorry, Schedule 1.
I haven't got a Schedule 1. Where's the Schedule 1?
Page 153, have you got a page?
Oh, yes, I beg your pardon. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just updating the list.
Okie dokie. Martin?
Thank you. Maybe outside the parameters of this policy, but I'm looking at the appointment issue around the appointment pool. Where's that? Appointees should have the appropriate balance of skills, knowledge, integrity and governance experience.
What page are you reading that? Are you reading that off the policy?
Off the policy.
Yep.
Okay. Page 151. And I want to sort of tease out how we as a council as a whole monitor that. Now I realise that there's issues of natural privacy, that people want to be, in some sort of talent list or eligibility. There's a sensitivity around
Sure.
those appointments, but I just want to, what is the mechanism that we look at a whole range of balance and a range of skills, rather than perhaps a more traditional, historical, who we know, but there may be some people.
So the recruitment process would include an understanding of the role and the skill sets required to add balance to a board, and when the recruitment is, the process is being undertaken, that is what the recruitment panel would be looking for to recruit for the role.
And how much do you get a...
Sorry, can I just add into that? It wasn't uncommon when I was chairman of when we used to have a CCO subcommittee, where we'd actually go out and just, I hope I'm right here, Andrew, because you were on it with me as well. We often would go out to recruitment agencies and ask them to do some of the legwork for us as well. So it was not, generally not done by our staff. And back then, I don't know if our staff do it nowadays. But.
Well, and a similar approach in terms of the Audit and Risk Committee, in terms of recruiting external members, which are a part of that panel, we engaged the Institute of Directors with a scope of what we're looking for, and they presented a range of CVs.
I mean, now you're talking, because being on that panel, we did an excellent job, which you'd expect.
Outstanding, I thought.
But, the fact of the matter is, I'm just trying to, and you've done a good job, Gary, in spite
You
of
like my chair's report too, don't you?
But all I'm saying very seriously is shaking the trees so that we actually look for diversity, new talent, and we look at, people who are, if you like, showing potential and can make a significant contribution, and we're just being a bit lateral. And it's interesting you should mention the A&R, because I think, by and large, that was quite a good process, and probably Gary, the chair, will tell me it was a similar thing you followed, but it just, I don't expect to know all the potential nominees, but at the point at which the name or the shortlist comes to me, I just want to have confidence.
Sure. And again, for the Audit and Risk Committee, we had a lot of strengths for existing members, but we were looking for industry experience, experience in terms of skills, knowledge and experience that complemented the existing members, as opposed to duplicated, where you lose that diversity of thought.
And obviously you're giving me assurance that we are absolutely guarding against just automatically appointing or nominating someone who looks like me.
Yeah, it would be wrong for me to give you assurance in the sense that each recruitment process is driven on its own right and its own merits.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's the philosophy behind who we look for. And we talked earlier about some of the strategic risks that certain CCOs may or may not have in their organisation, and that would be the first top of the list would be getting suitably qualified, experienced individuals with the right mindset to come in and add value.
Yes, but also to be mindful of the population, of reflecting, the richness and diversity of views can bring.
100%. That's exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew.
I'll move.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more questions? Rob.
One quick question. Just in Schedule 1 on the listing of the current CCOs, isn't there a limited partnership that is a separate CCO that arose out of a limited liability partnership that we are a part to, that arose out of the food thing out at... I seem to recall that we actually created 2 more CCOs as a result of that restructure.
I'm absolutely positive Blair would be happy to answer that question. So I'll pass it on to him, and he can send a note around. I'm sorry,
that's okay. Look, it's just a matter of including it on there.
Yeah. Aren't they Waikato Innovation Growth and its subsidiary?
Yeah, but no, there was a limited liability partnership that we had to set up as one of the partners to one of the companies. And I recall at the time saying that, was that a CCO? And I was told yes. And on its own, it was subject to an audit also.
Okay.
Yeah. But I imagine this list will change anyway, won't it, over time, that there will be additions and deletions. So and does that require the policy to come back
so
to needing to be amended each time there's a change?
So this report will go through to council for approval. So if we find
Okay,
that
you'll put
there
it
is
on
another
there.
one, we'll put it on the schedule to be approved by council.
Okay, thank you.
But going forward, Rob was saying in future we could create more CCOs and every one of those would, just the creation of a new CCO would not require a review of the policy again.
No,
would it?
no.
You just update the schedule but not the policy, is that right? Is that kind of what you were talking about?
Yeah, that was the second question.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Andrew's moved it, I'll second it. Is there any debate? Okay, those in favour, those against, is anyone against? That was unanimous, thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Okay, item 17, policy review, freeholding of council endowment land policy, page 154.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. This is a review of an existing policy. The policy has been in place for a very long time in various forms, and its general intent is to encourage lessees of council endowment land to purchase the freehold from the council, in other words, buy us out, and that enables us to reinvest the money typically at a better rate of return. So we've favoured freeholding over a lengthy period. There are very few of these leases left. At one time there were, tens, if not hundreds of them, but the Schedule 1 and 2 show that we're down to a dozen odd of them, and every year that list shrinks by 2 or 3 as well. So happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Nick. Just paragraph 5, just want to be clear that it says that all council-owned land to be sold, including endowment and land ground leases, requires a specific resolution from the council or the Finance Committee. Does the Finance Committee have that delegation, does it?
Yes,
as
it
well,
does.
there's also.
Yes.
Okay. Great to know that. Okay, and and you kind of addressed it then. There seems to be some, not urgency is the wrong word, but there is a drive to get rid of these things because they are currently not particularly economic. Is that right?
Yes. Look, I wouldn't say there was a particular drive.
Yeah, that was the
to
wrong
get
way
rid
to
of
say
them.
it,
But yes, we're better off every time we sell one in purely financial terms. One or two of them are more interesting. You'll notice, for example, in Schedule 2, page 159, the first 4 items in that schedule are the Ward Street lands which leased to Wintec, and of course they've been recent subject of a council.
Are they the ones that have just been demolished?
Yes, yeah, formed into car parking pending a future development. So, I mean, in terms of the strategic importance of these, some are very much more important than the others. The one on the first on Schedule 1, you'll see, that will be subject to discussion in the PX section of this agenda. So some of them have a greater degree of focus on them than others.
So we're not particularly marketing these things. They are still just sitting there with a tenant generating probably below market returns.
Yes, very much so.
So why wouldn't we be marketing them?
They're of most value to the incumbent tenant, and given that the nature of the leases are 21-year leases with perpetual rights of renewal, there's no particular financial driver on the part of a tenant freeholding in years 2 to 21. But as the lease nears its end, obviously, and a potential huge increase in ground rent is anticipated, then that's when tenants are likely to move. So from their point of view, they're better off actually not freeholding until they absolutely need to.
Okay, thank you. Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. Nicholas, I know we talked about it the other day, but just refresh me, if we're allowed to in this brief, the Ward Street and what's happening around that precinct and those properties.
Yes, I prefer to actually, if I may, to talk about that in the PX section of the meeting, if Chair's happy with that.
Yep, fine. Okay, no more questions? Andrew, had you signalled you're going to... You had? Okay. Andrew's moved it. I'll second it. Is there any debate? Okay, those in favour, those against. Is there anyone against? That's unanimous, thank you. Item 18, Policy Review Municipal Domain Endowment Funds Policy, 160.
Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Very similar.
This is very similar. There's a lot more detail in the report, and that's really just to make sure that members are quite comfortable with the detail of what this policy actually deals with. This policy was quite significantly reviewed in 2016, and the scope of it was broadened to allow potential CCO activity in the endowment sphere. So effectively, what we have currently is a policy that I think keeps most doors open, at the same time providing sufficient guidance for the management of these parts of council's property ownership. Happy to take any questions again.
Rob.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I'm just questioning in paragraph 12 where the little matrix is, where it says that the cash that we're holding, which is $28.5 million, and it's used to offset debt. I understood one of the requirements under the municipal and domain endowment funds policy was that we were supposed to be generating income to reduce rates. Now, I'm just a little bit that this is perhaps not the purpose to reduce debt. Are we handling those funds appropriately in terms of, and I understand from reading this, there's no deed that specifies this, it's just been, if you like, common law.
Yes.
That's the way that we're supposed to use the revenue that we generate from this fund.
Yes, I think I'll answer the easy part, which is this an appropriate use? The answer is yes, it is appropriate.
Yep.
In terms of the sort of arcane accountancy matters, I'll hand over to the GM for that one, I think.
To the arcane accountant.
So I mean, it's negative income in the sense that it's cost that we don't have to bear because we have lower debt. So if we think about rates are the purpose of rates to cover everyday costs of running the city.
Yep.
That means that indirectly it is supporting lower rates because we have less debt, therefore less interest costs.
Yeah, but if we can now borrow money at 2.8%, which we'd have to do to perhaps go out and buy further investments in the city, which might give us a return of 6.65%. Is there an opportunity, and this might be something that we could look at in this risk workshop, but I'm just wondering if we are blindsiding ourselves a little bit by saying, well, it's 4.77, which is our average cost of capital, but we could actually go and borrow that 28 million at, and I'm guessing here, but it's about 2.8% or whatever the current rate is, and we could actually benefit our ratepayers by about 4% if we could invest and get a yield of 6.65 on whatever we invested that 28 million or part thereof in.
If it's a conversation. I mean, there may be opportunities. Obviously, returns are associated with risk, and it comes down to that risk appetite discussion. So
understand that.
So it's whether or not we choose to actively chase investments or opportunities, and if council makes a decision that we want to be more proactive than we are, I think that's the conversation we should have. Being more proactive, obviously, asks us to be quite aware of what our risk appetite is and what risk we're happy to take on board.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say there is a resolution to bring a comprehensive report to the council in June, dealing with this specific matter, how best to deploy the endowment funds.
The 28 million that's sitting in cash.
Well, the whole package,
and the other
really.
investments.
How best to use it.
Okay.
No, I won't.
Can I suggest then, through you, Chair, to the GM, that when we have this conversation about risk, that this particular matter be brought forward, because it would be useful to have a workshop session
Yep.
that doesn't just specifically address this, but includes it in the discussion, so that when we come to June, we may feel as if we've had an opportunity to discuss and get a bit of a feel as to whether we might be able to get a better return for our ratepayers via this mechanism, rather than doing what we're doing at the moment.
So the risk workshop you're talking about, it's the afternoon of the 4th of March and the morning of the 5th of March, and that will be an open session where it's going to be very much asking elected members in terms of what keeps you up at night, where opportunities you see us to take on further risk. And so 100% we'll put that on the table. It's really about distilling where our key strategic risks are and where our opportunities
And this might be a good example to use around identifying what risk appetite might exist around the governance table, given, as you've already alluded to, David, is that obviously there's a risk involved in going from 2.8% current interest rate saving to, say, the 6.65, which is the current yield that we're getting on the three commercial properties that we currently own.
Well, of course, when we get into that strategic risk discussion, this conversation will be, we'll put it through a filter of saying, is this a challenge or an opportunity for us that isn't a strategic risk, because there's a lot of certainty about it. It's just deciding where on the continuum of risk we want to be, as opposed to a strategic risk fundamentally being something that is significant and unknown or uncertain, like natural disasters, for example, and our response to that. So, but 100%, we'll talk about it on the day. We've got that briefing or that report coming back in June. We're definitely going to give this topic a lot of ear.
Thank you.
And just further to what you're saying, Rob, if you actually look at the policy, the recommended policy on page, it doesn't have a page number, but it's the first page of the policy, so it's after the, so it would be page 166. If you look at principle 4, no, it's the first unnumbered page out, so there's the fold out, and it's the next page after the fold out. So the fold out is page 165, so it would be a page 166 if it had a number on it. So in principles 4, investment must aim to increase returns from endowment funds and must return a dividend to the council that is equivalent to the average cost of council's debt over the first 3-year period of every 10-year plan. Also, further guidance, 7A, undertake new profitable investments as cash flows allow, which over their life will yield a substantially greater than previously achieved. So the policy does push us towards improving our returns, which is part of what you were suggesting, I think. Okay, Paula.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Sorry, I just lost a thread in that last bit of discussion between what's the difference between the workshop that's coming on March the 5th, 6th, 4th, whatever, and June, and how they fit together.
So 4th and 5th is a strategic workshop. So the 4th is really teeing up the session. We have an external facilitator coming in to talk to all elected members about the strategic risk versus operational risk. And we'll be talking about some concepts that will lay the foundation for the following day's morning session before the Audit and Risk Committee in the afternoon.
Right.
And the morning session on the 5th of March will be about reviewing Council's current key strategic risks and asking ourselves, one, are they what we believe are the current risks, or have we missed anything? Are there emerging risks that we need to take account of? And two, how comfortable do we feel that we've got the mitigations in place, and those mitigations are enough to make us feel comfortable, which is where we'll get into the appetite discussion.
Right, and the one in June is where
So in June, it's just a report back to Council or Finance?
I think it's council in June, but that's a whole sort of overview of the way these funds have been deployed, so and how else they might be deployed at that stage.
Okay, so that's
a different topic. It's a subset of risk.
Yeah, it's a different topic, but not entirely distinct.
Associated.
So that's a follow-up for Rob's question then. In the workshops, the 4th and 5th March, that's where we'll bring all of these strands together, see how they're interacting with each other, even if one's a subset.
A workshop whereby we'll challenge ourselves on our understanding of strategic risk versus operational.
An interactive workshop.
Yes.
I look forward to it.
Yep.
Thank you.
You will, and the facilitator is fantastic, so you will enjoy it. Please all come.
I will come.
Okie dokie, no further questioning. I'll move the staff recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Mallet Cassim. Any debate? Okay, those in favour, those against, carried, passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're moving into confidential now. There will be a delay as we move into public excluded, because we need to shut down all the lives. How long is it going to take? So, okay. So what I suggest, if you want to have a coffee or go to the toilet, grab it now and try and be back by 3. Oh, sorry, yeah, and we need to move the resolution too. Okay, I'll move it. I'll second. Mallet Henry. Those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you.